In this example problem, we are once again going to be making a pro forma income statement, but we don't have all of the sub budgets, the lower level budgets prepared for us. So for Ace Eyewear over here, we're going to have to go through and determine the number of units they're going to produce for each model, the material cost that it's going to take to make each unit, etc. So we're going to need that information to ultimately prepare our pro forma income statement at the end, and namely be able to compute our COGS for that pro forma income statement. So what do we have to work with? We've got three different models for Ace Eyewear. We have fashion frames, safety frames, and youth frames. We have the expected sales volume for each one of those different models, how much we sell each one of those models for, how many of them we have in beginning inventory, and how many we have in ending inventory. We also have information about the inputs that go into the production of each respective fashion frame, safety frame, and youth frame. The direct material cost per unit is 90 cents for fashion frames, 40 cents for safety frames, 80 cents for youth frames. The labor cost per unit is $1.95, 85 cents, and $1.75 respectively. And it takes 6 minutes to make a fashion frame, 9 minutes to make a safety frame, and 12 minutes to make a youth frame. So let's go through from that information and figure out what our different production budget, direct materials budget, etc., would look like. So for fashion frames, we're going to have the formula you always use to find your number of units produced, take your expected sales volume. For that model, it's 50,000. Add to it your ending inventory. Our information tells us we have 2,500 fashion frames in our wares at period's end, which means all in all, we're going to have to come up with 52,500 pairs of fashion frames. But we don't have to make all of those because we have 25,000 in beginning inventory. And click the right 25,000 here. So how many do we have to make? If we need 52,500 and we already have 2,500, we got to make 50,000. For safety frames, we can follow the same procedure. It is 20,000 of those to be sold. We have 1,000 of those we want to have an ending inventory. So we're going to have 21,000 of those in total. But we already have 1,000 of them in beginning inventory, so we only have to produce the other 20,000 during the period. And then for our youth frames, we're selling expectedly 22,000 of those. Our ending inventory is going to be 1,100, which means all in all, we need to have 23,100 pairs of youth frames to meet our sales volume and have that ending inventory buffer that we so desire. We don't have to make them all because we have 1,100 of them in beginning inventory. We're very consistent with how much we start with and end with for each respective model. We're going to have to make 22,000 youth frames. So what is this going to cost us in terms of materials? Well, I just take my units to be produced, just calculate it up above, 50,000, 20,000, and 22,000 respectively. And I multiply it by the cost per unit for materials that's given in the problem. Fashion frames cost 90 cents a piece. Safety frames, in terms of materials, cost 40 cents a piece. And youth frames cost 80 cents a piece. And now I just got to multiply. If each of those 50,000 fashion frames is going to cost us 90 cents in materials, that means we're going to spend $45,000 in material costs producing fashion frames. For safety frames, 20,000 units at 40 cents a piece means we're going to spend $8,000 in material costs on that particular model. And for youth frames, 22,000 units to be produced at 80 cents per unit of material cost means we're going to spend $17,600 on materials to produce youth frames during the period. One cost down, let's go and do our labor costs, but we're going to follow the same procedure. Our units to be produced is still 50,000 for fashion frames, 20,000 for safety frames, and 22,000 for youth frames. Our direct labor cost per unit, given in the problem, is $1.95 for fashion frames, 85 cents for safety frames, and $1.75 for youth frames. And the direct labor costs we'll find the same way. Just take the number of units produced times what the cost is going to be per unit. 50,000 pairs of fashion frames at $1.95 a piece is going to cost us $97,500 in labor costs. And the same math going across means we're going to spend $17,000 on safety frames and $38,500 on youth frames. So we've got our two direct costs, our materials and our labor predicted, budgeted for. Let's also budget for some overhead. And for overhead over here, what I'm going to do is I need to compare apples to apples. See, our allocation rate is in terms of per labor hour, but the production time given in here is in terms of minutes. So I got to convert one or the other. So I have either minutes to minutes or hours to hours. And I always think it's easier to convert minutes into hours. So let's figure out, instead of saying 6 minutes, 9 minutes, and 12 minutes respectively, what portion of an hour each model, fashion frames, safety frames, and youth frames is going to take. And to do so, I just take our time per unit in terms of minutes, which is 6, 9, and 12, respectively. I'll just type them in here. And I divide it by 60. And I don't know why I've got decimal places shown. Let's get those out of there. And now I can express this in terms of per hour by taking the number of minutes that each model takes and dividing it by 60. So instead of saying 6 minutes per unit for fashion frames, we can say it takes zero point 0.1 hours per unit for fashion frames. 9 minutes out of an hour means that a pair of safety frames takes 0.15 labor hours to produce. And for youth frames, 12 minutes is the same thing as zero point 0.2 hours. And now with that, I can just use those numbers that we just calculated right there to allocate out the $5 per hour that we're expected to incur in overhead costs for every hour our laborers work. So I'm going to go, I'm going to take my predetermined overhead allocation rate, which is going to be $5 for every single model. We don't have different rates for different models. It's not the way it works. And then I'm going to multiply that by the numbers that I just found, the portion of an hour it takes to make 1 unit of each model. So 0.1 for fashion frames, 0.15 for safety frames, and zero point 0.2 for youth frames. And if I go through and I multiply, I come up with 50 cents of overhead for every fashion frame we make is how much we're going to incur. For safety frames, it's 75 cents. And for youth frames, it's going to be $1. So now I've got all of my cost per unit figured out. Let's figure out how much total overhead we're going to allocate to each of our models. And to do that, I'm just going to take the number of units that we are producing of each model, which has not changed. We can still grab it from the bottom of our production budget, 50,000, 20,000, and 22,000 respectively. I'm going to multiply it by that overhead cost per unit that we just calculated. So 50 cents, 75 cents, and $1 respectively. Fill handle to drag those in. There we go. And now I just got to multiply 50,000 pairs of fashion frames with each one causing us to incur 50 cents of overhead cost means that in total, that product line is going to cause us to incur $25,000 in overhead costs. 20,000 safety frames at 75 cents a piece means that product line in total is going to cause us to incur $15,000 in overhead costs. And for youth frames, 22,000 units at $1 a piece is $22,000. So now I have all of my cost components figured out. What's my next step? To figure out how much in total between our three cost components, materials, labor, and overhead, every pair of fashion frames, every pair of safety frames, every pair of youth frames is going to cost us. And I can just grab those numbers from my previous calculations. So how much did it cost us for each for in materials for each unit that we made? It was 90 cents for fashion frames, 40 cents for safety frames, and 80 cents for youth frames. So let me just bring those numbers on down into my calculations. For direct labor costs, we've got that determined up here as well. Each unit that we produce of fashion frames is $1.95, 85 cents for safety frames, and $1.75 for youth frames. So I can go and I can bring those numbers into this table that I'm using to figure out what my total cost per unit is going to be. And we just figured out the cost per unit of overhead a couple of steps ago. It was 50 cents for every pair of fashion frames, 75 cents for every pair of safety frames, and $1 for every pair of youth frames. And all in all now, what is our cost per every pair of fashion frames that we make? 90 cents in materials, $1.95 in labor, 50 cents in manufacturing overhead. That is $3.35. And I'm going to go through and just sum up three numbers for safety frames, and it comes out to $2. And if I sum up the three cost components for youth frames, those cost us in total $3.55.